Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Jon Myer Podcast. Today, we're talking about transforming VDI or virtual desktop interface for healthcare professionals. Joining us today is Kamal, who's a senior VP of product and program management at Parallels. Kamal, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, John. Super excited to be here.
Kamal, let's talk about VDI a little bit. And I love the conversation that we're going to be talking about healthcare professionals with VDI. We all go into our local doctor and they scan and they log into this, desktop. And it's not really a desktop. It's a virtual desktop for them. That means they can log in anywhere. But what can you tell us about VDI?
Yeah. Look, first of all, thanks for having me on this podcast and talking about this important topic, right? Like, when we talk about VDI, it's good to take a step back and look at, hey, why VDI? What is this thing, right? This has existed for 20 years. Why is this conversation relevant when, like, AI is all about everything, right? Like, this is not called AI in its terms. So, what is this? I think like what matters at the end of the day from a customer, whether they're in healthcare or any other kind of a setting, it's the application they're accessing, right? How do you get access to an application wherever you are on any device, anytime, right? And in a secure manner, because security matters, as you especially pointed out, it's your doctor, there's all these HIPAA privacy concerns, there's also like security from hey, what kind of data is the doctor, the nurse, the other practitioners within that clinic able to see? There's all these concerns, right? So how do you access that in a secure application on any device anywhere? That's what VDI really enables. But the second question you may ask is, hey, but everything is a cloud application. Why VDI, right? The unfortunate reality is that, like, if you go into a B2B enterprise setting, there are mission critical applications that are not SaaS applications, cloud applications, which still happens to be that legacy Windows application, line of business, custom applications that was written many years ago. That is super critical for running your business, right? In the healthcare setting, it's your EHR, right? Where all your information about you, your patient record, your medical billing records, a whole bunch of doctor related notes is all sitting there, right? That's your application. And that application is not running in the cloud. It happens to be running either on a server, or even if it's running in a cloud, it's running as a custom line of business application in there, right? Now, how do you get access to that application so that when I'm showing up there for that 10, 15, 20 minutes, the doctor is able to access it or the nurse is able to access it, put in your information in there, right? Like, let's say they are going to suggest a drug for you. What does that drug interactions look like, right? Accessing all that right there when they need it. And then at the end of your visit, there's the insurance, we living in US know about this whole insurance aspect of it. There's this whole insurance interaction that needs to happen. How do you give that insurance interaction so that you're billed appropriately? You're just paying what you need to, not being overpaying for what your services are, etc. All that, right, is what we are calling as application here. And that application is typically accessed through this VDI that's either running on an on-premises data center or it's running in the cloud, but you have access to this application when you need it on any device, whether it's an iPad, Apple MacBook, or it's on a Windows device or Android.
Kamal, when I think of VDI, I think of organizations trying to, VDI was huge 20 years ago. You even said it. But when you implement it now and you think about implement now I have this hardware. I have to host all this stuff. I have to manage all this stuff. Or there's a cloud provider. And we talk about security and, simplifying the access. How are organizations actually implementing VDI these days?
Yeah, I think your question had two parts, John. Maybe I'll split it into two parts, right? Like, hey, this technology is 20 years old, right? Why is it relevant now? Why should IT care about it? I think maybe let's try to dice that first, and then maybe let's talk about like, hey, what should organizations be concerned about, right? There are three or four things that has changed in the IT environment today, right? The first thing is you spoke about cloud, right? cloud is a paradigm shift in how the IT thinks about like both the expenses, both the capex versus opex, and like these monthly bills and everything. And then the second part of what has happened is that like the applications that are today that used to be like just a client server application that could be simply rendered through a VDI is not the case today, right? An application interacts with five other applications, and those five applications may be SaaS applications, maybe other applications that are still legacy applications, but it's a heterogeneous IT environment, right? Because applications don't work in a silo these days. Applications work with five tens of applications, right? Like let's take that healthcare setting again. There are applications that do just billing, right? Billing within a healthcare setting is a separate application. Checking for insurance validity is a separate application today, right? So each of these can be considered as separate services that now needs to interact with this core mission critical application, which is your electronic health record application within an environment of a healthcare. So now, how do you make that happen, right? That has evolved since the days of 20 years ago, what VDI looked like. The third thing I would say is like, hey, security, right? Security was very different posture 20 years ago, right? Uh, Users, IT, environment did not have this level of sophistication, this level of cybersecurity incidents, this level of awareness to security, right? Versus there is a general awareness, first of all, for the end users. There's an awareness for the healthcare practitioners. There's liabilities for healthcare practitioners. There is liability for the IT in terms of what and how and where they can bring solutions into. So security has evolved if you think about this IT environment. So I think I would say these three different vectors, right? The application interaction, this cloud environment, and security has changed what VDI looks like for the next, I would say, the version of VDI 3.0, you can say, right? As to what it is. So I think that is what has fundamentally changed in media. And like if you think IT beyond these three things I spoke about, there is some changing dynamics on the landscape of vendors today, right? There is more options, first of all. I mean, Parallels, which I represent, happens to be one of the options. We've always existed for the last 10 plus years, but the amount of capabilities that we've built to be able to enable enterprises to come on board has improved and like is now very one of the leading solutions in the market, right? Like so are other solutions that are available. Microsoft AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, is another solution. Like for example, how do you like bring a solution into a hybrid environment, right? Like with this cloud consideration, right? AVD enables cloud-only solution, and then there are vendors like Parallels that enables a Microsoft with solution, right? Because hey, it's not a Microsoft only solution that you have a Citrix environment or something else on your on-premise Windows RDS, and then you move to just a cloud solution with Microsoft AVD. But with Parallels, you can have this hybrid kind of an environment, right? So that is the kind of what the IT can think about. Hey, the vendor landscape has evolved. And there are also challenges if you think about partners implementing solutions today, right? Like because Citrix has had some acquisitions that has led to some partner challenges. And like in North America, where we are operating, everything is now shoehorned through a single distributor arrow, and with it comes certain other challenges. So there's evolving vendor landscape and dynamics, which the IT takes into consideration. Because like we see that in the surveys, right? Like today, like 40% of the healthcare and IT departments are considering other solutions, and pretty much 100% of this healthcare survey responses, they do want to have within the next 1 to 3 years an alternative VDI DAS solution, right? DAS being the cloud equivalent of VDI.
Kamal, can you talk to me a little bit more? What are healthcare organizations actually doing with VDI, and how is it making their lives easier?
Yeah, yeah. So let's imagine like a doctor walks in. I think you perfectly set it up, John. Like, which is like, hey, doctor walks in. You know how stressed. We all know how healthcare system here is stressed. Whether it's a nurse practitioner or doctor, they have very limited time, right, with you as a patient. If they have to deal with the technology aspect, right, which is unavoidable these days, you've got to use the technology within a healthcare setting. But at the same time, like, if you can't like really make this seamless, that like, hey, they're not meddling with the technology, but instead looking at you, talking to you, the patient, that is how seamless the VDI needs to make this happen, right? That the interactions that like we spoke about, the doctor walks in, they have all the patient related data right there in front of them, right? That is an aspect of how VDI brings this data to the doctor. It either pulled that data from a different system, showed it, hey, this is the patient. The doctor tapped the card for their credential, it logged them in, pulled the appointment for this patient, pulled that patient record in. So the doctor didn't have to ask, hey, John Myers has showed up to my appointment. They know John Myers is sitting in front of me because remember, they're walking from each room to room or bed to bed. So they can't like remember patient's name ahead when they walk in. That thing should just be there, right? How do you seamlessly provide that on that device? The second thing is once they have that patient information, now are there past history records, right, that the patient had? Or like maybe the nurse took some vital stats or recorded something of what you indicated, right? How do you get that surfaced up to the doctor and pulled it with some backend data and then brought it up? All these interactions between these different applications happen for the doctor right there, right? Which means like securely I'm able to like capture all this between these different systems and brought this data back to the doctor, right? And then I don't know if you've recently walked into these doctors' offices, they don't type anymore, right? They actually talk to their laptops or devices. There are popular dictate softwares or like these softwares, like which is, it cuts time, like which means that like if they were typing, they were probably taking few minutes out of that 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever their billing cycle was, right? Away from looking at you, instead looking at the computer. That is distracting if you visited a doctor, right? Hey, the doctor is not looking at me. Instead, they can actually dictate. How do you dictate, and how does this application that's running in a cloud or a server, how do you really capture this dictate to go back to there from a local peripheral device, right? Which is probably a USB device or a mic or something, right? To go back to the server, interact with the application, and get captured into that EHR. That is again a capability that these VDI enables with the underlying operating system, right? How do you capture those streams of audio, interact, put it back into a different application, right? So I would say those are different things. And then finally, like, you've seen like doctors print all the time to give you something, not just write, right? They sometimes print, hey, you took a vaccine, let me just print this, here's vaccine information, right? So they need access to printers, scanners, these kind of devices, right? So how do you do that? By from an application like, oh, here's the patient, this is the thing I need to print. The printer is sitting in this office, not remotely, right? So how do you now print that data back to this? That's again a capability that the VDI enables, whether it's from their iOS or like Android or like their laptops or physical desktops.
Kamal, it feels like VDI is reducing some of the friction for healthcare professionals and allowing them to not only focus on their practice, but focus on the patients at hand. And before I wrap things up, I want to ask you one more question. Do you have any real world examples about the healthcare organizations leveraging VDI for improving patient care?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had quite a bit of success, specifically in the healthcare vertical, right? The statistics I mentioned earlier that like, hey, 40% of healthcare customers are looking for options this year, and like pretty much the 100% of the healthcare customers are looking for options in the next 1 to 3 year. Means that like healthcare happens to be a big vertical for us. We've had some success with a physical therapy network with 5,000 centers across US, called Athletico, which is moved from a Citrix environment to Parallels, and they made the switch in a fairly short period of time, right? Which is like 30 days or less, and they've been successful in implementing the solution. We've had a large EHR. When you think about EHR, Epic comes to mind, but there are other EHR systems out there. Allscripts happens to be one of those EHR systems, and they're running 20,000 plus users with 2,700 clinics, which are running on this Parallels system right now, right? And they're running on-premises data center. They're running some footprint on Azure, but they're able to manage this kind of hybrid environment across these different clinics using Parallels with the specific use cases we spoke about for these healthcare professionals.
Awesome. Kamal, thank you so much for your time. This has really been interesting.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me, and hopefully your listeners got like a little bit of insight why VDI is cool again.
Definitely. Well, everybody, we've been talking with Kamal, who's a senior VP of product and program management at Parallels, around transforming your VDI or virtual desktop interface for healthcare professionals. Jon Myer. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, because guess what? We're out of here.